I watched her walk away that morning with her suitcase and a forced smile. She said the trip would be good for her. 3 months, she told me. Just some time to reset, to reconnect with myself. I nodded, pretending to understand. Pretending I wasn't already afraid she wasn't coming back the same. Things between us hadn't been perfect. If I'm honest, we'd been drifting for a while. The little things had started fading, the good morning kisses, the late night talks, the laughter. We'd become efficient. Functional. But I still believed we had a foundation, something worth fixing. So when she brought up the idea of solo travel to clear her head, I agreed. I told myself this was her way of fighting for us. And I wanted to believe it. The days after she left were strangely quiet. Her absence echoed in the walls. I tried to stay busy, told myself the space would help us both. We messaged here and there, video calls every few days. But even early on, I noticed the shift. She was distracted. Distant. Sometimes it felt like she was forcing the calls, like she was just ticking a box to keep me from asking questions. I tried not to read into it. I told myself she was just overwhelmed, in a new place, adjusting. But the silences grew longer. The messages shorter. Sometimes she wouldn't answer for days. And when she did, her tone felt robotic. Polite. Like I was a coworker, not a husband. Still, I waited. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband clinging to his insecurities. I convinced myself that space sometimes creates awkwardness, and maybe we'd laugh about it when she got home. Maybe she just needed time to breathe. When the 3 months ended, I cleaned the house, made her favorite meal, bought her the sunflowers she liked. I stood at the door like a kid waiting for Christmas. And then she walked in. She hugged me, but it was brief, stiff. She kissed my cheek, not my lips. She looked at the living room like it was unfamiliar. Her eyes swept across the space, pausing for only a second before she mumbled, "It's good to be home." But it didn't sound like home to her. It sounded like a hotel she didn't want to check into. She was different. I don't mean in the way people change after a trip. I mean it felt like a stranger was pretending to be my wife. The way she moved, the way she talked, even her posture, it was all unfamiliar. She wasn't angry or cold exactly. Just disconnected. Like she'd already moved on, emotionally. Like she was fulfilling an obligation by coming back. I asked how the trip went. She gave short answers. Good. Relaxing. Eye-opening. No details. No stories. And when I pressed, she deflected. I don't want to get into it right now. I'm tired. She barely unpacked. Just dropped her bag in the hallway and disappeared into the bedroom. I stood there alone in our kitchen, next to the flowers, the candles, the cold dinner. Over the next few days, the tension sharpened. She barely spoke. She'd scroll on her phone for hours, lock the screen when I got near. At night, she turned away from me in bed. When I touched her arm, she flinched, like my hand burned. I asked her what was wrong. She said I was imagining things, that she just needed time to adjust. But there was no warmth behind the words. No remorse. No softness. I started to feel like an intruder in my own home. One evening, I walked into the living room and caught her whispering on the phone. When she saw me, she hung up immediately. I didn't say anything, but she could see it on my face. The doubt. The hurt. The suspicion. She didn't offer an explanation. Just walked past me like I was air. Still, I held on. I kept hoping the switch would flip. That maybe I was being paranoid. That maybe she just needed time to settle back into our life. But deep down, I already knew. Something happened on that trip. Something she didn't want to tell me. And I didn't know what was worse, the betrayal I feared, or the way she looked at me now. Like I didn't matter anymore. Like our history, our memories, the years we'd built together, were just background noise to her new story. I stopped trying to talk about it. She clearly wasn't ready, or willing, to be honest. So I waited. Silently. Slowly disconnecting myself. I began to grieve the version of her that left 3 months ago, the version that, apparently, was never coming back. But the worst part wasn't the silence, or even the distance. It was the way she seemed so comfortable in it. Like she had already made peace with leaving me behind. And I couldn't understand how someone who once loved me so deeply could now look through me like I was just a shadow on the wall. I didn't know what I was holding on to anymore, hope, denial, or just fear of letting go. All I knew was that the woman I loved had returned in body, but not in soul. And as much as it hurt to admit it, I was starting to realize something I wasn't ready to face. This was no longer a marriage. It was a performance. And I wasn't even in the lead role anymore. The change in her wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. She moved differently, carried herself with this strange mix of guilt and pride. Like she was ashamed but trying hard not to be. She'd stop mid-sentence sometimes, stare into the distance like she was reliving something she wasn't ready to share. One morning, I found her in the bathroom, just sitting on the floor, hands on her stomach. She didn't say anything when I walked in. Didn't even look surprised. Just stood up slowly, wiped her face, and brushed past me. Later that evening, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said it like it was a fact. Not a bomb. Not a betrayal. Just a piece of information. I'm pregnant. I froze. My brain refused to make the connection at first. I blinked, waiting for her to laugh or correct herself. But she didn't. She just sat there, unmoving. We haven't, I said, and then stopped, because the rest didn't need to be said. We both knew. The timeline didn't make sense. Her mouth opened, like she was going to lie, but her face betrayed her. The truth slipped out before she could decide how to frame it. It happened when I was away, she whispered. I didn't plan it. It was a mistake. A stupid, painful mistake. I couldn't feel my hands. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to get out. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, hoping silence would force her to undo what she just said. But she didn't. I was confused, she continued. I felt lost. I was lonely and I met someone. It wasn't serious, I swear. It just happened. I wanted to yell, to ask how something like that just happens when you're supposed to be finding yourself. I wanted to break something, scream, demand answers. But instead, all I felt was cold. Like someone had emptied me out. So you cheated on me, I said, voice flat. And came home pregnant. She started to cry. Quietly, with her hands over her face. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. My body wouldn't obey. I didn't know until recently, she said between sobs. I didn't come back to hurt you. I didn't come back to ask you to raise a child that isn't yours. I didn't know what else to do. I don't know how long we sat there. Time folded in on itself. At some point, I got up and walked outside. The night air felt heavier than usual. Every breath I took scratched the inside of my lungs. I thought about the years we spent building a life together. The holidays, the birthdays, the quiet Sundays on the couch. I thought about how many times I'd defended her, forgiven her, loved her even when I felt unloved. I thought about how I trusted her to come back and fight for us. Instead, she came back carrying the consequence of a betrayal she hadn't even planned to tell me about. And yet, even in that moment, some broken part of me still wanted to find a way to fix it. Still wanted to believe it could be salvaged. But then I remembered her eyes when she walked in. The way she hugged me like a stranger. The way she pulled away every time I tried to connect. She hadn't come home because she missed me. She came back because she didn't know what else to do. And now she was hoping I'd clean up the mess. When I came back inside, she was still at the table. She looked up at me with red eyes and trembling lips. I don't expect anything from you, she said. I didn't want to lie anymore. I nodded. Not because I understood, but because I didn't trust myself to speak. I went to bed alone that night. She slept on the couch. Or maybe she didn't sleep at all. I wouldn't have known. Over the next few days, she tried to act normal. Asked if I wanted tea. Folded laundry. Moved around the house like we were still playing house. But I couldn't play along. Every time I looked at her, all I saw was what she didn't tell me. What she let happen. What she brought back. I started staying out longer. Sitting in the car after work. Taking long walks just to avoid going home. She noticed. She tried to talk. But every conversation ended in silence or tears. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't reopen the wound. And deep down, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. The betrayal wasn't just the cheating. It was the choice she made to hide it. To come home like nothing happened. To hand me a truth only when she had no other option. Trust doesn't break all at once. It erodes. Bit by bit. Word by word. Lie by omission. And in that kitchen, with 4 words, "I'm pregnant." It happened, she shattered the last piece of it. I wanted to forgive her. Not because she deserved it, but because I wanted to stop hurting. I wanted to believe I was strong enough to rise above it. But some wounds don't heal with kindness. Some require distance. Space. Closure. And maybe the only way forward was without her. I didn't eat much. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't concentrate at work. Every part of my life felt hijacked by a constant loop of questions I couldn't answer. When did it happen? Was it more than once? Did she love him? Did she love me? But the question that haunted me most was, what am I still doing here? I started questioning my own judgment. How did I not see this coming? How did I ignore the signs? I kept replaying every conversation we had before she left, every moment where she seemed distracted or distant, and suddenly it all made sense, but only in hindsight. That's the cruelty of betrayal. It rewrites your memories. Turns your past into a lie you didn't realize you were living in. I stopped trying to pretend everything was okay. We barely spoke. She stayed in the guest room. I didn't ask how she was feeling. I didn't ask about the pregnancy. Not out of cruelty, but because I couldn't afford to care anymore. Caring felt like weakness. And I was tired of being the only one trying. The silence between us became a wall. And behind that wall, I started rebuilding pieces of myself. Quietly. In the shadows of the mess she made. I booked a session with a therapist. Just to talk. Just to try and make sense of what was happening. I sat in that room and let it all out. The confusion. The guilt. The part of me that still missed her. The part that hated her. The part that hated myself for still missing her. The therapist didn't give me answers. She just listened. And slowly, the fog started to lift. I realized I was grieving someone who wasn't dead. That's the hardest grief of all, mourning a person who's still living under the same roof. Seeing their face every day and knowing they're not the same. Knowing you'll never get back who they used to be. I went back for more sessions. I started journaling. Not just about her, but about me. About the ways I'd abandoned my own needs long before she betrayed me. About the parts of myself I gave up just to keep the peace in a relationship that had been breaking long before the trip. I used to think staying was strength. That enduring pain for love was noble. But slowly, I started to understand something different. Sometimes, leaving is the real act of love. Not for them, for yourself. She tried, here and there, to reconnect. She'd ask how I was feeling. She'd make my coffee like she used to. She even suggested we go to couples counseling. I nodded, but I didn't commit. Because I knew. Deep down, I knew it wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. It was about giving myself permission to let go of it. One night, I came home and saw her crying on the porch. She didn't say anything at first. I sat next to her. Not out of love, but out of closure. She looked at me and said, "I hate what I did to you. I ruined everything." I didn't argue. I didn't comfort her. I just looked her in the eye and said, "Yeah. You did." She nodded slowly, like she'd been waiting for me to say it. And then she said, "Do you think we could ever come back from this?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about everything we'd built. The life. The plans. The years. I thought about the loyalty I gave without question. The love I offered without condition. And then I thought about the moment she decided all of that was worth risking for something temporary. Something selfish. Something she never even intended to own up to. No, I said quietly. I don't think we can. She cried harder, but I stayed still. Because this time, her pain wasn't mine to carry. I had carried enough. That night I wrote a letter. Not to her, but to myself. I listed the things I wanted. Peace. Respect. Honesty. Love that doesn't make me question my worth. I read it twice, folded it, and kept it in my wallet. It was a promise. One I intended to keep. Days passed. Then a week. She stopped asking about the future. Stopped pretending we could move past it. We both knew what was coming. We just hadn't said it yet. But inside I had already left. I wasn't angry anymore. Just empty. But it was the kind of emptiness that makes space for something new. Something better. The pain was still there, but it had shape now. I could hold it, examine it, even put it down when I needed to. I wasn't drowning in it anymore. I started waking up earlier. Going for walks. Calling friends I hadn't spoken to in years. I made a playlist of songs that made me feel grounded. I packed a bag, just in case. I didn't know where I'd go yet. But I knew I couldn't stay. Not in this house. Not in this memory. Not with her. Because love without trust is a cage. And I wasn't going to live in one anymore. I told her I was leaving the following morning. She didn't ask where I was going. She just nodded, eyes glassy, lips trembling, but no words came out. Maybe she knew begging wouldn't matter. Maybe she was just too exhausted to try. Or maybe, deep down, she agreed that there was nothing left worth fighting for. I didn't make a scene. I didn't list all the ways she broke me. I didn't shout about the betrayal or the pregnancy. I simply said, I can't do this anymore. And I meant it. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I packed in silence. Just the essentials. A few clothes, my laptop, toiletries, my journal, the letter I wrote to myself. I looked around the room one last time, at the framed photos, the books, the furniture we picked out together. It wasn't just a house. It was a museum of memories. But now it felt more like a mausoleum. And I wasn't going to bury myself with it. Before I walked out, she said my name. Her voice was small. Hesitant. I'm sorry, she whispered. For all of it. I believed she meant it. But sometimes, sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't unmake the choices. It doesn't rebuild trust. It doesn't pull the knife out of your back. It just acknowledges the wound. I gave her a small nod. Not forgiveness, not anger, just acceptance. She had her path now. And I had mine. The first few nights were rough. I stayed in a small rented apartment on the edge of town. The walls were bare. The bed was unfamiliar. The quiet was loud in ways I didn't expect. I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up from dreams that felt like memories. Her laugh, our old routines, her head on my shoulder, and each time I opened my eyes, the reality hit all over again. But I didn't go back. I didn't call. I didn't check in. Because healing doesn't happen in half measures. You don't rebuild yourself while standing in the ruins. I kept going to therapy. I talked about the anger. About the regret. About the guilt I felt for not seeing the truth sooner. And slowly, the bitterness started to soften. I realized I'd spent too much of our marriage shrinking myself. Making space for her mood swings. Smoothing over arguments just to avoid conflict. Biting my tongue when I should have spoken up. And when she betrayed me, I felt not only hurt, but erased. Like none of what I gave ever really mattered. But that wasn't true. The effort I gave meant something. Even if she didn't honor it, I did. And that counts. That matters. I held the line even when she crossed it. I stayed loyal even when she strayed. That wasn't weakness. That was character. I started going for long drives with no destination. Just the open road and my thoughts. It became a ritual. A way to think without pressure. A way to let go of what I couldn't change. The silence became my companion, not my punishment. Some nights I cried. Not because I wanted her back, but because I missed the version of myself that loved fearlessly. The one who believed in forever. I mourned that man. And then I started rebuilding him. I reconnected with old friends. Had coffee with people who remembered me before the marriage, before the heartbreak. They reminded me of the things I'd forgotten, my sense of humor, my ambitions, my ability to enjoy life without needing someone else to validate it. I started setting boundaries. Not just with others, but with myself. I stopped making excuses for things that hurt me. I stopped pretending I was okay when I wasn't. I allowed myself to feel everything without judgment. One afternoon, I stood in front of a mirror and said out loud, "You didn't deserve what happened. And you don't owe her a second chance." Saying it made it real. I stopped asking, why? Why she did it? Why she chose someone else? Why she came back pretending everything could still work? Because those questions weren't about healing. They were about control. And I had to learn to live without closure from her. My closure had to come from me. Weeks passed. Then a month. Then another. I didn't track the time like I used to. Life was moving again. Slowly. Not perfectly. But forward. And that was enough. Eventually, I filed for divorce. No drama. No courtroom battle. Just paperwork, signatures, finality. She didn't fight it. Maybe she knew this was mercy, not revenge. I didn't hate her anymore. But I also didn't love her. Not the version of her who came back with secrets and silence. And as the final documents arrived in the mail, I held them in my hands, took a deep breath, and felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I survived it. Because I walked through hell and came out carrying nothing but the truth. I had lost a marriage, yes. But I had found myself. Divorce didn't feel like the end. It felt like an acknowledgement of what had already ended long ago. When I dropped the signed papers off at the lawyer's office, I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm. Like I'd finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying for years. People say divorce is messy, but the mess was already behind us. What remained now was just clarity. There were still echoes, of course. Little things that reminded me of her. The way a particular scent would hit me in the grocery store. Songs we used to play on rainy weekends. The silence when I walked in the door and didn't hear her humming in the kitchen. But the pain attached to those memories had dulled. It was no longer a sharp stab in the chest. It was more like a bruise I'd stopped pressing on. I focused on rebuilding. I started running again. Early mornings. Empty streets. Just me, my breath, and the rhythm of my feet against the pavement. There was something healing about pushing my body forward when everything else in life had felt like a pause. I got serious about my work again. Threw myself into projects I'd been procrastinating. I wasn't trying to escape the pain anymore. I was channeling it. Turning it into progress. The more I moved on, the more I realized how far gone our relationship had been even before she stepped onto that plane. The cheating, the pregnancy. It was the final blow, sure. But the cracks were there long before. Conversations that felt like negotiations. Laughter that didn't reach our eyes. Sex that felt like obligation. I had been holding on to an idea of her, not the reality. Letting go of the fantasy was harder than letting go of her. People started asking questions. Some knew. Some didn't. I kept my answers simple. It didn't work out. If they pushed, I gave them the look. The one that says don't. Just accept it. I wasn't interested in telling everyone the details. I wasn't looking for pity or applause. I wasn't the hero of a tragedy. I was just a man who'd made a hard choice for the sake of his own peace. One night, out of nowhere, she texted me. "Hope you're doing okay." I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed out a dozen different replies. Some kind. Some cold. Some that were nothing but questions. Then I deleted them all. I put the phone down. She wasn't my problem anymore. And I didn't owe her a response just because she was lonely. Healing isn't about pretending nothing hurts. It's about knowing where the pain belongs, and refusing to carry what isn't yours. Her guilt was hers. Her choices were hers. Her consequences hers. I went back to therapy, one final session. I told my therapist I felt free. Not euphoric. Not invincible. Just steady. Like I had my feet under me again. "You've done the hard work," she said. "Now you get to decide what kind of life you want to build." So I did. I redecorated my apartment. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I bought new bedsheets. Hung up prints I liked. Cooked meals I actually wanted to eat. Played music loud. Took long baths. Read books that made me think. I started smiling more. Laughing again. Not because life was perfect, but because I was no longer waiting for someone else to fix it. And then, slowly, I opened myself back up to people. New friends. Real conversations. The kind that didn't revolve around what I'd been through, but who I was becoming. I wasn't afraid to tell the truth. Not bitter. Not guarded. Just honest. I met someone at a friend's dinner party. Not a whirlwind. Not some movie moment. Just a good conversation, an easy laugh, a mutual curiosity. I didn't rush it. Didn't force anything. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to fill a hole. I was just letting something new begin, without expectations. And whether it lasted or not didn't matter. What mattered was this: I'd finally come home to myself. I had survived heartbreak. Faced betrayal. Reclaimed my self-respect. And in doing so, I discovered a truth no relationship had ever given me before. I am enough. With or without anyone else. Months passed. Not in a blur, but with sharp awareness. Every sunrise was a reminder that I had made it through something I once thought would destroy me. And not only had I survived, I had grown. I had learned how to be alone without being lonely. How to enjoy my own company. How to be accountable to myself, and no one else. I stopped measuring my worth by someone else's ability to love me and started recognizing it in how I showed up for myself. There were still hard days. Healing isn't linear. There were random moments where grief would resurface, quietly, without warning. A place we once visited. A dish she used to make. But instead of collapsing into those memories, I let them pass through me like weather. They didn't define me anymore. They just existed, like distant echoes in a life I no longer lived in. I stopped romanticizing what we had. I saw it for what it was, a relationship that outgrew its honesty. A union that became too heavy on one side. I had given her loyalty, time, and trust. She gave me betrayal and excuses. And once I accepted that truth without needing it to hurt, I felt real closure. There was something powerful in understanding that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I forgave her, but that didn't mean she belonged in my life. Forgiveness was for me, to release the resentment, to move forward without carrying her mistake as my burden. I thought about how many people stay stuck, trying to repair what broke them. I used to be one of them. I stayed because I believed leaving was quitting. That marriage meant holding on, no matter what. But staying in something toxic isn't commitment. It's self-abandonment. Real strength is knowing when to walk away. I started speaking up more. Not just in relationships, but in every part of life. I didn't hide my thoughts to make others comfortable. I didn't tolerate things that disrespected my peace. I had spent too long keeping quiet to avoid conflict. That silence had cost me my identity. Never again. When people asked if I'd date again, I said yes, but with intention. I wasn't looking to be saved. I didn't need someone to complete me. I wanted someone who brought peace, not chaos. Honesty, not convenience. And until that came along, I was fine on my own. There's a different kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've been through the worst and made it out better. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. I didn't second-guess myself like I used to. I trusted my instincts. I knew what my boundaries were, and I wasn't afraid to enforce them. Eventually, she reached out again. This time with more than a text. She wrote me a long message, said she was in therapy, taking accountability, trying to understand why she did what she did. She said she hoped I was happy and asked if we could talk one day, even just for closure. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need anything from her. I had already found my closure in the life I was living. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is not reopen a wound that's finally healed. I started mentoring others who'd been through similar heartbreaks. Not as a therapist, not as some expert, just as someone who'd walked through fire and come out the other side. I shared my story not to dwell, but to show what's possible when you choose yourself. The biggest lesson I carried with me was simple: betrayal doesn't break you, how you respond to it does. You can let it harden you, make you bitter, make you afraid to love again. Or you can let it wake you up, force you to grow, teach you what real self-respect looks like. I chose the latter. And maybe that's what love really starts with, not with another person, but with the moment you decide your peace matters more than your fear of being alone. Looking back, I don't regret the marriage. It taught me everything I needed to know about what I want, what I won't tolerate, and what I'm worth. I gave it everything I had. That's why I could walk away with no shame. It didn't end the way I thought it would, but it ended the way it needed to. And now, I'm living proof that sometimes, the hardest goodbye becomes the most powerful beginning.